Interestingly, I'm standing at the River Eel. This is France, Strasbourg, and that is the building. That is the magnificent building called the European Parliament. And it interconnects with another one behind here, which has about 4 chambers. And those 4 chambers are composed of, like extensions of what they call European Parliament, where each block was named after incredible politicians like Churchill, of course, Winston Churchill, and another from another country, about 4. But what is interesting is most of the decisions that are made up here affect a lot of what we have in Africa. And so the question begs is that whether or not decisions that are propounded in this European Parliament can actually have binding effect on Uganda per se. And the argument that we propound, some of the arguments that are propounded in my book called Strict Mythology, is that in spite of the fact that these so-called human rights decisions or conventions or laws that are propounded in European Parliament may have, persuasive arguments in terms of application in Ugandan jurisprudence, what is important is fundamentally to agree with our laws. And I'm talking about, for example, the African Charter, in terms of, laws that bind us. I know the European Convention, Article 9, Sub-Article 2, for example, talks about fundamentals in terms of advocating for rights of the human being, and it gives it a generative, interpretation, very, very wide interpretation. But you see, that has to be resonated with the African Charter, Article 2, Sub-Article 1, which propounds that countries are enshrined or enjoined or enjoined to advocate or carry out those laws and provisions that would ordinarily propound their norms and customs, as it were. And I think that's the decision that we need to understand as Africans, that in spite of those decisions, they are more like, persuasive, but they're not binding. And we should look at binding obligations, but also perhaps the better lesson for us is that we should not simply negate some of the things, but perhaps pick a lesson. So I am here not to make a discourse in terms of total disagreement of European norms or even traditions or even conventions or even jurisprudence, but making a comparative analysis in terms of what would work for us as Africans, because that perhaps is the bigger lesson for us. That's perhaps what we look at when you look at cases like Nabagesera, where Justice Musata makes strong allusions or discourses in terms of the applicability of these laws. When you look at Wava, cases of Wava, which argues that statutes of European conventions or perhaps colonial conventions or legacy would have no substantive or impact in terms of jurisprudence, in terms of our law, then those are things that beg a question in terms of statutory or jurisprudential interpretation. So these are things that we need to debate perhaps at a bigger discourses. And maybe I would invite you to look at my book, Ubuntu Bulamandelo, which also in terms of statutory interpretation, where we argue law in terms of a disposition. I am a legal realist, so I would want to argue law in terms of a changing, thriving society. Although I also agree that our norms and customs should actually be preserved in their entirety, and we should be mindful and perhaps careful with this interpretation that those customs and norms that are repugnant are null and void to the extent of their repugnancy. The question is, what is repugnant? In whose eyes are we using to measure the repugnancy? So these are issues that I would like to debate and perhaps bring to a wider interpretation in terms of jurisprudence. So be blessed, my friends, and greetings from France. Thank you so much.